What's shaking, cocktail fans? I'm Modern Bar Cart CEO Eric Kozlik, coming to you today with a Sazerac tutorial. Now, if you've ever been to New Orleans and had a cocktail there, chances are there's been a Sazerac featured front and center on the menu. And basically, what a Sazerac is a take on the old-fashioned. So it might seem simple to make, but there's a couple of choices that you can make while you're creating this beautiful drink that really affect the outcome. So I'm going to take you through two different ways to make a Sazerac here, featuring some beautiful ingredients from the Mid-Atlantic. So before we get into the formulations, let me introduce the bottles. And we're kind of going head to head with Mid-Atlantic spirits here. First up, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, of course, we have our Roundstone Rye, courtesy of Catoctin Creek Distilling. Hopefully they'll forgive me for using this old label. And then we also have our Absinthe Superior from Mount Defiance Distilling in Middleburg. Two beautiful products. I've made many a Sazerac with them in the past. Then from the state of Maryland, we have our Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey, based right out of Baltimore. And it's a beautiful distillery. Definitely visit if you get the chance. And of course, our Absinthe Nouvelle from 10th Ward Distilling in Frederick. Those are the sets of ingredients we're going to be using as we create our cocktails here. And just like the old-fashioned, the first step you need to do when making a Sazerac cocktail is to soak a sugar cube with bitters. So we're going to take our two mixing glasses here. We're going to take just regular Domino's granulated white sugar cubes, put it in the bottom, and then we're going to soak these with our embitterment aromatic bitters. And the nice thing about using these in a Sazerac cocktail is that they're actually a Creole style aromatic bitters. And what that means is that they've got some of those deeper anisey kind of flavors, which is what you're really looking for to complement the absinthe and the whiskey. So I'm not going to try and measure dashes. I'm just going to kind of hold this bottle upside down as it drips in, and you can tell when your sugar cube is soaked all the way through, right? So we have soaked these in the bitters, and I like to do one important extra step to help get the dissolving process kick-started, because as soon as you add ice and spirits into these mixing glasses, it's going to make it harder for the sugar to dissolve. So we want to give it a little bit of a fighting chance. And the way that I do that is by adding just a little bit of water. We're talking just a splash, just enough to coat the bottom of the mixing glass. That's maybe 1/8 or generously 1/4 of an ounce each. And when we muddle these, we're going to muddle them into a bit of a slurry. And again, this is to get that dissolving process started before we add the ice and the spirits. So when you've got a flat bottomed mixing glass like this, I like to use a muddler with a flat bottom as well. You want to maximize the amount of contact that you have with the sugar. And notice that I'm not going up and down, right? I'm kind of grinding that sugar cube into a really fine slurry. Okay, so that one's off to the races. Now, if you have a concave mixing glass with a rounded bottom, sometimes it helps to use a muddler with the same, right? We're maximizing the contact with the sugar and the water. And again, kind of grinding it in there. I find that this really helps, because if you don't do something like this and you don't stir just the perfect amount, you're either going to have a watery old-fashioned, or you're going to have an old-fashioned that's way too boozy up front and then way too sweet at the end. So this is my way of avoiding either of those two outcomes. So what we're going to do is we're going to add, of course, the ice to our mixing glasses. Okay. And the Sazerac cocktail calls for 2 ounces of rye whiskey. So we're going to add our Sagamore Spirit to the Maryland formulation, and to the Virginia formulation, we will add our Roundstone Rye whiskey. So at this point, we've got sugar, bitters, ice, and whiskey. Basically, the makings of an old-fashioned. And this is where our two roads of the Sazerac diverge. And that happens to be involving the absinthe. Now, the traditional way to use absinthe in a Sazerac is something called an absinthe rinse. And to do this, you're basically going to take a small amount of the absinthe, maybe a quarter to a half an ounce, I'm not quite sure how much that was, and you're basically going to kind of coat the inside of the glass, roll it around just like so, get it nice and coated, and then once that takes place, you just simply discard it. And that kind of kills me a little bit on the inside. I know how hard Mark, the distiller at 10th Ward, works on this stuff, and it kills me to discard it. So that leads us to method numero dos, which is using something called an atomizer. Now, this is the same type of device you'd put a perfume or a cologne in. It dispenses the absinthe over a wider surface area, so you can kind of go to town with this and kind of hammer the inside of that glass with the absinthe. And you gotta be pretty liberal to mimic the effects of an absinthe rinse, but there you have it. Just for good measure. So we've got our two glasses. We've got the absinthe rinse executed. Now it's time to stir our spirits. So we're gonna do that here. I'm gonna stir for somewhere around 20 seconds. Note that this has already kind of had a little bit of time to sit here with itself. So there's been a little bit of dilution kind of occurring as I've been talking here. Then we're going to take a large rock, place it in your absinthe rinsed rocks glass, right? And then we're going to strain basically our old-fashioned mix into your absinthe wash glass. Just like so. And then the final touch for the Sazerac cocktail is a nice lemon twist. This really kind of puts an exclamation point over the deeper, darker notes of the whiskey and the anisey herbal notes of the absinthe. So we're gonna go ahead, take a nice big couple of twists here. Make sure they're nice and long. And then when we express these over the top, we're also going to make sure that we rub them right along the rim so that as the person is drinking them, they get a little hit of that lemon oil. Boom, just like that. And if you want extra points, also trim your garnishes to make them look a little nicer. This has been a Sazerac tutorial courtesy of Modern Bar Cart. If you want to learn more about us and our awesome products like these embitterment aromatic bitters, head on over to modernbarcart.com. And if you're into it, also subscribe to our podcast, the Modern Bar Cart Podcast. We drop new episodes live every Thursday. But for now, you know what? Go make yourself a Sazerac, but remember, drink responsibly and experiment boldly. Cheers.